Welcome to Skytech-Lens. In July 2025, the Trump administration sent shockwaves across North America with a single, sweeping announcement that would upend the continent's automotive industry almost overnight. The US government imposed a staggering 35% tariff on a vast array of automotive products imported from Canada and Mexico, instantly raising the stakes for automakers, suppliers, and workers on all sides of the border. The tariffs targeted everything from raw steel chassis frames and engine components to the most advanced electronics and safety systems, threatening to disrupt the flow of essential parts. Even finished pickup truck bodies, one of the most popular vehicles in North America, were suddenly caught in the crossfire, with automakers scrambling to assess the impact on production and pricing. The administration justified the move under the banner of national security, arguing that America's reliance on foreign-made vehicles and parts posed a strategic risk. But in Ottawa and Mexico City, leaders saw the tariffs as a direct assault on decades of painstaking economic integration, a move that threatened to unravel the very fabric of North American cooperation and prosperity. The administration's stated goal was clear: force auto jobs and investment back to the US by making imports prohibitively expensive, hoping to revive domestic manufacturing and create new American jobs. But this approach ignored a crucial reality. Modern auto manufacturing is a seamless cross-border operation. Parts and vehicles routinely cross the US, Canadian, and Mexican borders multiple times before final assembly, making the industry deeply interconnected. The tariffs sent shockwaves through Detroit, Windsor, Toluca, and beyond, threatening millions of jobs, destabilizing communities, and putting the backbone of Canada and Mexico's economies at risk. Instead of dividing North America, the tariffs had an unintended effect. They united Canada and Mexico in opposition, forging a new sense of solidarity against a common threat to their shared prosperity. The announcement, timed during a period of political transition and heightened market uncertainty, was widely seen as an attempt to exploit perceived weakness. But the backlash was swift, and the strategy quickly began to backfire. The stage was set for a high-stakes confrontation, one that would test not only political alliances, but also the resilience of supply chains and the very structure of North American trade for years to come. The 35% tariffs' impact was immediate and brutal. Factories that once buzzed with activity fell eerily silent almost overnight, as the ripple effects of the new policy spread through the industry. In Ontario's Windsor-Essex, orders for key auto components vanished overnight, halting production lines and silencing factories. Workers who had counted on steady shifts suddenly found themselves without work, and local businesses that depended on the auto sector felt the shockwaves. Mexican plants in Juarez and Saltillo slashed shifts, facing an uncertain future as cross-border supply chains seized up. The uncertainty left families anxious, and communities that relied on these jobs braced for economic hardship. The cost of a single vehicle's parts soared by $900, making cross-border trade unviable. Automakers struggled to absorb these costs, and consumers soon faced higher prices at dealerships. Ancillary industries like Ontario's printing plants shuttered as auto production stopped, putting thousands out of work. The domino effect rippled through the region, impacting suppliers, logistics companies, and even local restaurants. The interconnectedness of the North American economy was exposed. A tariff in Mexico cost jobs in Canada and the US. What once seemed like distant policy decisions now hit home for families across the continent. Even American automakers, reliant on Canadian and Mexican parts for a third of their supply, faced shortages and rising costs. Production delays became common, and uncertainty clouded the future of the industry. The policy meant to protect US manufacturing instead threatened to cripple it. Factories that had survived previous downturns now faced their toughest challenge yet. The lesson was clear. In a globalized world, hurting your partners means hurting yourself. The crisis revealed just how deeply every link in the supply chain depends on the others, and how fragile prosperity can be when those links are broken. Canada and Mexico didn't back down in the face of mounting US trade barriers and tariffs. Instead, they saw an opportunity to reshape the future of North American trade on their own terms. They responded with a bold, unprecedented plan to bypass the US entirely and create new trade lifelines that would connect their economies directly to the world. At an emergency summit, Canadian and Mexican leaders came together, setting aside past differences to forge a joint supply corridor. This agreement would link their ports and industries, allowing goods to flow directly to Europe and Asia, completely sidestepping US-imposed tariffs and restrictions. The Atlantic route, running from Canadian ports like Halifax, would ship auto parts and finished vehicles to Europe in under 10 days. This direct connection meant Canadian and Mexican manufacturers could reach European markets faster and more efficiently, all while avoiding US soil. Meanwhile, the Pacific route, using Mexico's bustling ports, would open up Southeast Asian markets. By bypassing both the Panama Canal and US customs, this route offered a faster, more cost-effective way to reach Asia's booming economies. This wasn't just a temporary fix to a political standoff, it was a strategic, long-term shift. Both countries began investing heavily in new port infrastructure, modern transportation facilities, and advanced logistics networks, laying the groundwork for lasting independence from US trade policy. The new corridor challenged the long-held assumption that all North American trade must flow through the US. It redrew the map, showing that Canada and Mexico could chart their own course. Trade officials hinted that this new system could outlast the current tariffs, potentially reshaping trade patterns for decades to come. The shift was already visible in changing shipping routes and evolving economic strategies. For the first time, Canada and Mexico were not just reacting to US policy, they were actively building an alternative economic future, one that promised greater resilience, independence, and opportunity for generations to come. The supply corridor was just the start. Canada and Mexico also launched Coordinated Retaliation. Both imposed reciprocal 35% tariffs on US automotive inputs, ensuring American suppliers felt the pain. Canada targeted politically sensitive US products like agricultural tractors to pressure swing states. Mexico introduced a dual tariff system on US parts processed in Mexico, disrupting just-in-time production for US automakers. The strategy wasn't to cripple Ford or GM, but to hit ancillary industries in key US states, creating domestic pressure for change. This macro cross-compression aimed to turn US businesses and voters against the tariffs. It was a sophisticated economic chess match with jobs and political futures at stake. The tariffs' fallout hit workers first. Layoffs and shift cuts spread across Ohio, Michigan, Windsor, and Saltillo. Families faced sudden financial hardship as the integrated industry ground to a halt. Small and medium businesses, lacking the resources to adapt, faced closure or ruin. The promise of protecting American jobs rang hollow as the pain spread across all three countries. Politically, the tariffs backfired. Instead of boosting the administration, they sparked backlash in key US states and shattered the illusion of US dominance. Canada and Mexico's united front forced a new political reality. North America was now a contested, not unquestioned, US-led space. The dispute was no longer just about cars. It was about the future of the continent's political order. The economic and political tremors were impossible to ignore. The trade war rattled financial markets across North America. Risk premiums on auto sector loans soared, making borrowing for expansion or even daily operations more expensive. Mexican manufacturers faced currency swings and rising debt costs, choking off investment and innovation. Banks tightened lending, creating a credit crunch that rippled through the economy. US auto dealers faced inventory shortages as supply chains broke down. Fewer cars on lots meant lost sales and frustrated customers. Consumers, facing higher prices and delays, began turning to European and Asian brands. The tariffs, meant to boost US automakers, instead pushed buyers toward foreign competitors. The policy was backfiring, hurting the very industry it aimed to protect. Canada and Mexico seized the moment to pivot toward Europe and Asia. The EU welcomed direct access to North American auto goods, drawn by lower carbon intensity and new supply options. Canadian and Mexican suppliers quickly found new customers in Germany, France, and Italy, building resilience and reducing US dependence. Mexico's Pacific ports opened doors to booming ASEAN markets, positioning the country as a gateway to Asia. Even US manufacturers, squeezed by tariffs, began seeking suppliers in Europe and Asia. The tightly woven North American economy was unraveling, with global supply chains redrawn. The tariffs, meant to bring jobs home, instead fueled a new wave of globalization. As the trade war raged, a social media battle erupted. In Canada and Mexico, the hashtag #byDetroit became a rallying cry for economic independence and resilience. Workers posted videos from shuttered factories and bustling ports, turning complex policy into human stories. The digital campaign reframed Canada and Mexico as proactive, not victimized partners. In the US, workers began questioning whether their own government's policies were to blame for lost jobs. The online conversation became a real-time barometer of the political costs of the trade war. In the 21st century, economic battles are also fought and sometimes lost on social media. The 2025 auto trade war could mark a turning point for North America. A best-case scenario would see the US back down, but trust is already broken. More likely, the new Canada-Mexico corridor and retaliatory tariffs will become permanent, fracturing the continent's economy. Factories may close, investment may flee, and all three countries could become less competitive globally. The crisis risks reshaping North America's geopolitical alignment, with Canada and Mexico forging a future less tied to the US. Their new cooperation could outlast the dispute, changing the continent's balance of power. The lesson: prosperity depends on cooperation, not unilateralism. Without it, North America faces a future of division and diminished opportunity. Thanks for watching a video, and subscribe the channel now for more updates. Thanks.